We're into year 9 for U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and it's been the deadliest so far for U.S., NATO forces, and also civilians. According to the U.S. mission, a record 1,500 men, women, and children lost their lives in the first 6 months of this year, and violence in the run-up to August's disputed election in Afghanistan also spiked. While the debate in this country, such as it is, centers on U.S. security, U.S. interests, and U.S. troop numbers, it's the Afghan perspective we rarely hear, especially the perspective of those who 9 years ago got it right about what would come of the U.S. invasion. RAWA, the Revolutionary Association of the Women of Afghanistan, predicted a long, deadly engagement. What are they saying now? Well, it's a dangerous situation, but we're joined by Zoya, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee of RAWA, an underground women's organization you're going to hear more about. It's a pseudonym, and her face is obscured to protect her. Zoya, welcome to the program. Glad to have you. Thanks for being here. 8 years ago, I guess it was, not 9, but 8 years ago, RAWA was one of the few organizations that said, well, you tell us, what did you think organizationally was going to come of the U.S. invasion?
Thank you very much for inviting me here. Yes, RAWA was one of the only organization at that time who, from the very beginning, predicted that U.S. occupation and U.S. NATO occupation of Afghanistan will be failed. Because from the very beginning, the policy of RAWA was that if United States really want to help the people of Afghanistan, they have other alternatives, which is less bloody alternatives, we can say. For example, the first thing that United States government can do is to stop supporting Northern Alliance groups, which is another terrorist. And unfortunately, from the very beginning, we witnessed that United States entered Afghanistan, relied on Northern Alliance terrorists to defeat Taliban terrorists.
Now, we should just remind people who the Northern Alliance are. And when I say the U.S. troops have only been in Afghanistan for this many years, they're part of the evidence how U.S. influence was in that region for years beforehand. Tell us who the Northern Alliance were.
Yeah. We should not forget that Northern Alliance were those criminal groups who occupied Afghanistan in 1992 after the withdrawal of the Soviet puppet regime. And they were the first who started the war and destruction and crimes and raping our children and mothers and looting the Afghanistan historical heritage. So they were the first criminals that our people cannot forget and forgive them. We think that there's no actual difference between Taliban and Northern Alliance groups, because they both are terrorists, anti-women, anti-democracy, and they destroyed our country. So Northern Alliance supporting, compromising with these terrorists to defeat Taliban, which was quite that was the point that our people got hopeless about the occupation, because at the beginning our people had some hopes and they were a bit optimistic that maybe after occupation we will get security and peace. But when they saw that those people, the most wanted war criminals, are the friends of United States government, that really was a disappointed point. And from the very beginning we said that waging war does not bring liberation and democracy for our people.
At the time, though, people were saying, you had the First Lady out there giving the presidential radio address saying the U.S. attack on Afghanistan was needed not just to take revenge post 9/11, but to liberate women and girls.
Yeah, but we see that what happened to Afghan women. I mean, today Afghan women are more or less, they are facing the same problems as Taliban time. In the West, the people consider the opening of a school as a sign of liberation of women, which is not true. I mean, the doors of a school are open, but practically, because of insecurity, the parents do not want to send their children to a school, because on the way they are raped, they are kidnapped, they are forced to marry gunmen and warlords. The acid throwing incidents happened in Kandahar recently. So for these reasons, the parents in majority of the provinces, we should not just focus on Kabul as a capital city, but we have 34 provinces. there the people do not want to send their children. Or in the West, wearing and not wearing the burqa is a sign of democracy and liberation of women, which is not true. A burqa is a very symbolic sign of liberation. But we are still facing, the women of Afghanistan are facing a lot of problems and insecurity and oppression from different sides.
But we're told that's reason for why the U.S. troops should stay. They're the ones stopping acid being thrown in the faces of women.
But in the past 8 years was, I think, quite enough time to prove that United States was not able to stop these operation and these crimes against women. It's increasing day by day. Today, Afghanistan is controlled mainly by Taliban. 80% of Afghanistan is under the control of Taliban. And they have their own rules and laws against women. And the United States was not able to prevent them from committing these inhuman atrocities against women.
How much of all of this is America's fault?
I think United States fault starts from the 1980s when they created these fundamentalist groups, when they give them support, military and political and financial support. This is the point that the United States mistake starts, and unfortunately they are not learning from their mistake. They are repeating it by supporting, compromising, and nurturing these fundamentalist terrorist groups, and they are not relying on democratic forces and organizations and parties as they claim to be for democracy. But it's strange that they are not relying on democratic forces, and they're still working with another terrorist.
Talk about your experience. How did you get to be an activist with RAWA?
Yes, I mean, being a girl from this generation of war, the generation of crime, the generation of blood, I witnessed my people suffering all the time. From very beginning, when I was a child, I witnessed my family. I witnessed the millions of other Afghans, orphans, widows. My nation. You cannot find a wall in Afghanistan without the holes of the bullet. It's completely a ruined and destructive nation.
Sure.
So in this situation, I thought what to do. I mean, I had options to live in the West, which I don't want to do. And I had option, like millions of other Afghan women, to commit suicide or self-immolation, as self-immolation is getting really so-called popular among young generation, as because they're quite hopeless of this 30 years of war and crimes. And I had another way to struggle for liberation of Afghan people, and especially women. And as I considered RAWA as the most radical anti-fundamentalist organization, I joined RAWA.
Talk about, we hear a lot about Guantanamo in this country. Talk about Bagram and what's happened to the rule of law in Afghanistan, which is also one of the things the United States said it was going to help develop.
First of all, as long as these fundamentalist groups are present as a military force in the political scene of Afghanistan, we cannot talk about rule and law. Because who is making our laws, who are legislating for Afghan people, are the most wanted war criminals sitting in the chairs of the parliament of Afghanistan, unfortunately. The rapists, the war criminals, the drug lords are making legislature for Afghan women. How we can expect from them to make laws which is, for the people of Afghanistan. They are making laws like National Conciliation Bill, which recently passed to forgive the war criminals of 30 years in the past 33 decades of war. This is the laws that they are passing. So first of all, we cannot expect any rule of law as long as we are not uprooting the germ of fundamentalism from the roots. And about the Bagram, I mean, Bagram is one of the, I think, the biggest prison and one of the biggest, torture places of Americans. If they are closing that prison, they are starting another here, and they are spending a lot of money on that. And it's a place of torture and pain, and a sign of oppression.